There comes a moment in every human life when the mask begins to crack, when the image we built for the world trembles beneath the weight of what we've buried inside. And in that quiet, terrifying moment, the question rises, who am I really when no one is watching? That question, Carl Jung said, is the threshold of awakening, for beyond it lives what he called the shadow. But the shadow is not evil. It is not darkness. It is you unacknowledged. It is everything you've denied, everything you've repressed, everything you've banished to the basement of your psyche because it didn't fit the story you told yourself about who you should be. The anger you swallowed to be polite, the desire you buried to seem pure, the envy you denied to appear humble, the ambition you killed to seem spiritual. Every unlived part of you still lives, and it waits. It waits to be seen. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That means every unclaimed part of you, every emotion you suppress, every truth you refuse to face will rule you from the shadows. You'll think the world is cruel, when it's your own blindness reflecting back at you. You'll call people toxic, when they're only showing you what you've hidden. You'll curse circumstances, not realizing you built them unconsciously. The shadow does not appear to destroy you. It appears to make you whole. But the ego fights this because it clings to its image. It fears the mirror. It wants to be good. And that obsession with being good, with being light, with being liked is the very thing that keeps you fragmented. Jung understood that true morality is not about suppressing darkness. It's about owning it. The one who integrates their shadow becomes capable of real virtue. The one who denies it becomes a hypocrite, preaching love while seething with hidden resentment, smiling while suffocating in repression. Look around you. The world is full of people possessed by what they refuse to face. The moralist who secretly craves power. The humble one whose humility is pride in disguise. The peaceful one who represses rage until it erupts in violence. The good man who turns cruel the moment his desires surface. The spiritual one who uses light to avoid truth. This is the epidemic of our age, not darkness, but denial. We have built a culture that worships appearances and buries authenticity. But there is no enlightenment in avoidance. The light that refuses to face shadow becomes illusion. The shadow that refuses light becomes chaos. Only when both merge does the human being become real. To face your shadow is to enter your own underworld. It is to walk down into the catacombs of your psyche, where all your unlived lives whisper your name. It is not comfortable. It is not pretty. It will break every lie you've told yourself to feel safe. But safety is the enemy of wholeness. Comfort is the coffin of consciousness. When you begin to meet your shadow, you will see parts of yourself that terrify you. You will feel the hunger for control, the craving for dominance, the lust for destruction, the jealousy you never admitted, the rage you projected onto others. And here is the truth. Those parts are not your enemy. They are your energy. They are the raw, untamed power of your own life force, distorted only because you rejected them. Integrate them, and they become your strength. Deny them, and they possess you. This is why the people who pretend to be purely good often end up doing the most harm, because their shadow acts out unconsciously. They repress their aggression until it leaks through manipulation. They deny their selfishness until it festers into deceit. They bury their desire until it mutates into obsession. Jung saw this clearly in society, entire nations projecting their collective shadow onto the other, starting wars to destroy what they could not face within themselves. You see, when you hate someone, it is almost always your shadow you hate living outside of you. The liar who enrages you, the coward you mock, the arrogant you despise, they all carry your own denied fragments. To recognize that is the beginning of freedom. Because the moment you can look at your shadow without judgment, you reclaim power from it. Facing the shadow is not a moral exercise, it's a psychological revolution. It is how you stop being a puppet of unconscious forces. It is how you stop reacting and start creating. When you meet your darkness consciously, you stop fearing it. You can channel your aggression into ambition, your jealousy into self-respect, your rage into clarity. You begin to understand that your bad emotions were never evil, they were signals, suppressed energy seeking expression. The shadow contains not only your darkness, but your potential. Jung called it the gold hidden in the darkness, because everything extraordinary about you, your genius, your charisma, your drive, your individuality is born from the same place as your demons. It's the same fire, the same instinct, the same primal current. The only difference is consciousness. When you repress your shadow, you repress your power. When you integrate it, you become magnetic. You stop living to please others and begin to live as your true self. You stop apologizing for existing. You start speaking with conviction. You make decisions from your own authority instead of guilt. You stop running from your nature and start sculpting it into art. Think of history's great minds, Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, Jung himself. They did not fear darkness. They studied it, lived it, transmuted it. They understood that to know the human being, you must enter its abyss. Light alone blinds, shadow alone destroys. But the union of both creates vision. We live in an age that fears discomfort more than it fears ignorance. We medicate emotions, distract the mind, sanitize life, but in doing so we exile the parts of us that are real. We call anger toxic. We call sadness weakness. We call ambition ego. But the truth is, nothing is inherently toxic or pure. Everything depends on integration. A knife in the hand of a murderer is death. In the hand of a surgeon, it's healing. The difference is consciousness. So the question becomes, will you face yourself, or will you keep projecting yourself onto the world? Because until you meet the parts of you you've buried, the world will keep playing them back to you as mirrors in your enemies, your lovers, your failures. Every conflict will repeat until you recognize the reflection. Every betrayal will return until you see your own complicity. Life does not punish, it educates. To meet the shadow is to reclaim authorship of your story. It is to stop running from who you could be, not just the light you want to show, but the chaos that gives it shape. There is no greatness without darkness. There is no creativity without destruction. There is no authenticity without contradiction. The shadow is not an obstacle. It is initiation. It is the rite of passage every human soul must walk through if it wants to stop living as a mask. When you finally step into that inner fire, when you stop negotiating with your own truth, the world begins to rearrange itself around your authenticity. You start attracting people who no longer need you to play small. You stop being manipulated by guilt or praise. You start living from a power that is quiet, steady, undeniable. Because once you own your shadow, no one can use it against you. They can no longer shame you for what you've accepted. They can no longer control you through guilt or fear. You become psychologically invincible, not perfect, but whole. And wholeness is the greatest strength there is. The one who integrates their shadow walks through the world untouchable, not because they are free from darkness, but because they are one with it. They do not need to prove goodness. They do not need to hide their flaws. They have nothing to defend. Their calmness terrifies the insecure because it cannot be manipulated. Their presence disarms the deceitful because it carries no hidden agenda. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming yourself fully, integrating every polarity, reconciling every contradiction. It is not about becoming good. It is about becoming real. And reality, in its purest form, is both light and shadow, creation and destruction, saint and beast, all harmonized within a conscious soul. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's your mirror. It's the forgotten language of your own soul calling you back to completeness. If you keep running from it, it will chase you through people, through pain, through circumstance. But if you turn and face it, if you dare to see yourself as you truly are, you'll realize it was never there to harm you. It was there to free you. And when you finally stand face to face with that part of you you've denied for so long, when you stop flinching and simply see, a strange peace will descend. Because you will understand that every light casts a shadow, and every shadow exists because of light. You cannot destroy what you fear, but you can integrate it. You cannot purify the human, but you can awaken it. The shadow is not evil. It is you, unacknowledged, waiting for you to come home. And when you come home to it, when you finally embrace the dark twin within you, something extraordinary begins to unfold. A deeper intelligence awakens, one that doesn't speak in the moral language of good or bad, right or wrong, but in the primal dialect of truth. You begin to realize that the human soul is not a battlefield between light and darkness. It is the union of both. You are not a war to be won. You are an ecosystem to be balanced. This balance is the forgotten art of the modern world. We live in a civilization obsessed with purification, political, spiritual, emotional. Everyone wants to be seen as righteous, yet few dare to be real. We build personas of perfection, then suffer silently behind them. We pretend to have transcended instinct, yet we are slaves to it. We condemn what is raw, wild, animal, and in doing so we lose access to the very energy that gives us life. The ancients understood something we have forgotten, that to be whole you must make peace with your animal soul. You must descend into the parts of you that crave, that rage, that fear, that lust, not to indulge them blindly, but to understand their rhythm. The instinct to dominate can become leadership. The desire to conquer can become creation. The hunger for control can evolve into discipline. Every drive, when met with awareness, becomes sacred. You see, the shadow is not a thing to fix. It is a teacher. It reveals where your consciousness still fractures. It exposes the walls between who you are and who you pretend to be. When anger rises, it does not say you are evil. It says something in you demands to be seen. When envy burns, it does not say you are ungrateful. It says you have forgotten your own potential. Every emotion, even the ugliest, carries a message from the unseen. The wise listen. The unconscious react. The danger of spiritual bypassing, of chasing light and avoiding shadow, is that it breeds fragility. People who refuse to face their darkness become terrified of their own humanity. They speak of peace but collapse at conflict. They worship love but cannot face rejection. They preach compassion but cannot handle confrontation. They are brittle because they have not integrated their fire. Jung wrote that a tree's branches cannot reach heaven unless its roots reach hell. This is the law of depth. You cannot ascend higher than the depth you faced. You cannot build lasting joy upon denied pain. You cannot access the divine without embracing the primal. And so, the descent becomes sacred, not punishment, but preparation. The underworld of your own psyche is where your foundations are reforged. In that descent, you meet the archetypes that live within you: the warrior, the lover, the magician, the shadow child. Each one is a facet of your psyche, carrying gifts once deemed too dangerous to own. The warrior carries your strength. The lover holds your capacity for intimacy. The magician contains your creative will. The child preserves your innocence. But when you exile these archetypes, they distort. The warrior becomes violent. The lover becomes obsessive. The magician manipulates. The child hides. Integration means bringing them home, not to control them, but to harmonize them. That is the secret of inner power. The one who commands his archetypes commands himself. The one who denies them becomes possessed by them. Look at society, and you'll see possession everywhere. People unconsciously acting out their shadow archetypes, waging wars of identity, moral superiority, and hidden fear. They believe they are fighting for virtue, but they are fighting against their own reflection. To step out of this cycle, you must become the observer, the one who sees the play without being trapped in it. You must be both the actor and the director of your own psyche. That requires honesty deeper than comfort. It requires the courage to see how you manipulate, how you lie, how you crave validation, how you punish others for your own wounds. And when you can see all of that without flinching, when you can hold your ugliness in the same hands that hold your light, you are no longer divided. You become real. Reality, as Jung knew, is paradox. True wholeness is not serenity. It is intensity contained by awareness. It is the storm and the stillness coexisting. It is the serpent biting its tail, creation feeding destruction, death feeding rebirth. This cycle lives in you. Every time you face a part of yourself you once feared, you die a little and are reborn greater. That's what transformation really is, not escaping what you were, but metabolizing it into what you are becoming. Once you begin to live this way, you stop seeking purity and start seeking truth. You no longer need to appear kind. You need to be clear. You no longer chase acceptance. You embody authenticity. You become comfortable being misunderstood because your peace no longer depends on validation. The approval of the collective loses its seduction when you've made peace with your own shadow. And in that state, something subtle but immense shifts inside you. Your energy changes texture. People can feel it. They sense the depth behind your calm. They can no longer manipulate you through guilt, nor seduce you through flattery. You no longer oscillate between pride and shame because you see both as illusions of the same ego. You begin to move through life with a grounded confidence that cannot be faked, the kind that comes only from self-ownership. This self-ownership is the beginning of mastery, because the one who owns himself no longer seeks control over others. You have faced your own chaos, so you no longer need to impose order on the world. You have accepted your own shadow, so you can allow others theirs. You become a presence of freedom. People feel safe around you, not because you are harmless, but because you are integrated. You could harm, but you choose not to. That choice is power. It is this paradox: strength without aggression, confidence without arrogance, authority without dominance, that defines the fully individuated human being. The person who no longer needs masks because they have nothing to hide. The one who can walk through the fire of their own mind and emerge whole. The one who has seen the monster within and realized that the monster was never evil. It was misunderstood potential waiting for direction. When you live from this awareness, morality ceases to be obedience. It becomes alignment. You act rightly not because you fear consequence, but because your nature demands integrity. You no longer chase virtue. You are virtue, not the shallow virtue of performance, but the deep virtue born of integration. And in that quiet, potent alignment, you begin to sense something vast moving through you, what Jung called the self, the totality of your being. It moves like an ancient current beneath your personality, whispering through dreams, through intuition, through synchronicity. It rearranges your life in ways the ego cannot comprehend. It dissolves relationships that no longer align, collapses illusions that no longer serve, and rebuilds your reality from the inside out. When the shadow is integrated, your life stops being a reaction to pain and becomes an expression of consciousness. You stop chasing meaning and start embodying it. And that is when the world changes, not because you conquered it, but because you stop fighting yourself. You radiate coherence in a world addicted to fragmentation. You become living proof that darkness and light were never enemies, but partners in creation. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply the part of you that refused to die when you abandoned it. Now, through awareness, you invite it back to the table, and together you become whole. There comes a subtle turning point after wholeness, a threshold few ever cross. Because once you've integrated your shadow, life no longer feels like a battle between what you should be and what you are. The conflict dissolves, but what replaces it is not comfort. It is responsibility. True awareness demands action. Consciousness without expression decays into stagnation. You begin to feel it, a pressure, not from outside, but from within the soul's insistence that understanding must now become embodiment. The mind can comprehend the shadow, but only action can sanctify it. And this is where most retreat. They study enlightenment, but they do not live it. They speak of balance, but they do not risk it. Because integration, once achieved, calls for a greater task, the expression of your full self in a world still asleep. To live truth where illusion thrives is no small feat. The integrated man or woman must now become a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, between spirit and flesh, between knowing and being. You begin to realize that light alone cannot change the world. It must be anchored through form, through choice, through courage. You start to see how society's chaos mirrors the inner chaos of its individuals, how the systems that exploit, divide, and numb humanity are not external monsters, but collective shadows projected outward. The greed, the corruption, the vanity, the fear, they are humanity's unintegrated forces, scaled up to a global level. And you, now awake to this truth, feel the burden of awareness. You see through the illusion, but you still live within it. Jung called this stage the tension of opposites holding awareness in a world built on unconsciousness. It is the crucifixion of the modern soul, to stay open among the closed, to stay kind among the cruel, to stay grounded while the world trembles. It requires immense discipline not to fall into cynicism or superiority, for awareness without compassion becomes arrogance, and power without humility becomes tyranny. The shadow, even integrated, still whispers. It tests your strength through subtle invitations, pride disguised as confidence, indulgence disguised as freedom, detachment disguised as peace. This is why consciousness must be tended like a flame, not worshipped, not flaunted, but protected. The integrated soul learns to live deliberately, to guard its vibration as sacred territory. You begin to structure your life around clarity, the foods you eat, the words you speak, the people you allow near you. You learn to distinguish between stillness and stagnation, between peace and avoidance. You start to see that every choice either nourishes your alignment or fragments it. From here, life becomes an art form. Each decision, each interaction, each silence becomes an act of creation. You are no longer driven by emotion, but guided by principle. You speak only when words serve truth. You act not to impress, but to express. You no longer need to control outcomes because you have learned to control attention. You know that reality follows focus, and that focus rooted in clarity can move mountains. This is when the integrated individual steps into mastery. But mastery is not domination, it is stewardship. It is the understanding that power exists to protect, not to conquer. Influence exists to awaken, not to seduce. Mastery is not about control over others. It is control over your own inner weather. To hold your calm in chaos, to hold your integrity in temptation, to hold your empathy in confrontation, that is the mark of true power. When you begin to live like this, you discover that peace is not passive. It is an active force, silent but seismic. It reorganizes the world around you because it no longer resonates with distortion. The more coherent you become, the less the external world can manipulate you. The noise of society begins to fade, not because it grows quieter, but because you are no longer tuned to its frequency. And then something even deeper occurs. You begin to sense purpose. Not the kind of purpose society sells, built on productivity or performance, but an ancient cellular purpose that rises from within. You feel it in your bones that you are not here merely to survive or achieve, but to participate in the unfolding of consciousness itself. Every breath, every gesture, every encounter becomes a contribution to that evolution. You no longer chase meaning, you radiate it. Purpose at this level is not something you find, it's something you remember. It was always there, buried beneath conditioning. You realize your work is not to invent who you are, but to uncover it, to peel away the layers of falsehood until the essence of your being stands uncloaked. And when you live from that essence, your very presence becomes a statement. You stop convincing and start conveying. You stop seeking belonging because existence itself becomes your home. But the world, still asleep, will not easily understand you. Your calmness will be mistaken for detachment. Your boundaries will be called arrogance. Your strength will be seen as threat, yet you will not defend, because you will have learned that truth requires no defense. The awakened no longer argue. They demonstrate. You become living proof of what integration looks like. Your actions speak the language of evolution itself, and soon others will sense it. They will feel the gravity of your presence, not because you are above them, but because you are deeply in yourself. You no longer mirror their chaos, you invite their wholeness. You no longer absorb their pain, you awaken their clarity. Your empathy ceases to be a sponge and becomes a mirror. In your presence, people remember what authenticity feels like, even if it frightens them. This is how the shadow heals the world, not by being erased, but by being understood. Each person who integrates becomes a lighthouse for others, still lost in projection. And slowly, the collective begins to shift, not through ideology, not through control, but through example, through vibration. For consciousness spreads, not through words, but through resonance. You, once haunted by your shadow, now become its master artist. You use its colors to paint meaning into the world. You use its depth to anchor compassion. You use its fire to forge discipline. The very traits that once frightened you now empower you. You stop asking for the world to change and start embodying the change itself. And perhaps that is Jung's deepest truth, that enlightenment is not a state of perpetual light, but the courage to carry your own darkness wisely. It is not about becoming divine. It is about becoming whole, to live with open eyes, steady heart, and a soul strong enough to contain the full spectrum of existence, from shadow to light, from instinct to spirit, from chaos to order. When you reach that point, you no longer seek to transcend humanity. You become the completion of it. You walk through the world not as saint or sinner, but as something beyond both a conscious human being, unbroken, undivided, and profoundly alive. And so, when all the layers of illusion have burned away, when every mask has fallen, every projection withdrawn, every shadow met and embraced, you arrive at a stillness that feels ancient. It is not peace, as the world imagines it, not the quiet of escape or the absence of struggle. It is the stillness of integration, the calm pulse of a soul that has finally remembered its entirety. You no longer orbit around who you think you should be. You are simply what is. This is what Jung called the birth of the self, the emergence of the total human being, not the persona you built to survive, not the identity you clung to for safety, but the deeper, unshakable awareness that contains both your saint and your shadow, your love and your wrath, your tenderness and your will. You realize you were never fragments searching for completion. You were completeness pretending to be fragments so you could know yourself more deeply. In this realization, life changes texture. The ordinary becomes sacred. The mundane becomes miraculous. You begin to see that every struggle was a coded message from your own unconscious. Every fall, a descent into wisdom. Every heartbreak, a teacher disguised as loss. What you once called chaos was choreography. What you called suffering was initiation. Every dark night was carving the space through which light could enter. You stop running from life's contradictions because you understand that they are the very fabric of creation. Love and pain, joy and sorrow, light and shadow, they are not enemies. They are polarities dancing around the same axis. You were never meant to eliminate one or worship the other. You were meant to hold them both, to be the vessel through which the universe experiences its own duality consciously. That is the quiet, grandeur of a human being who has met their shadow. You are no longer enslaved by emotion, but you are not numb. You feel everything, but you are consumed by nothing. You carry power, but it does not carry you. You see through illusion, yet you remain compassionate toward those still caught within it. This balance, this fierce tenderness is what makes you truly alive. From here, the world no longer feels like something to survive or conquer. It feels like something to participate in. You begin to understand the paradox that completion brings, that true individuality is not separation, but unity expressed through uniqueness. You and the world are not two forces colliding. You are one force conversing with itself through infinite forms. When you understand this, your life ceases to be a reaction and becomes a work of art. You start to move with precision, not the precision of control, but of presence. You speak slowly because words matter. You act with intention because energy is sacred. You give because abundance flows through you, not because you seek approval. You walk gently because everything you touch, including yourself, is divine. And from this centeredness, a new type of service arises. Not the service of sacrifice, but of embodiment. You don't preach balance, you radiate it. You don't demand awareness, you embody it. You don't chase meaning, you exude it. You become the living antidote to fragmentation, a reminder that humanity is not broken, only asleep. And in your wake, others begin to stir. For consciousness is contagious. Presence awakens presence. When one person becomes whole, it ripples through the collective psyche like light through stained glass, illuminating every color of human potential. You may never know the magnitude of your influence, but it is felt in every conversation that deepens, every mind that pauses, every heart that softens in your presence. That is the quiet revolution of the integrated soul. So let the world rage and rebuild itself. Let illusion rise and fall as it always has. You are no longer at war with it, because you are no longer at war with yourself. You have met the shadow, and in meeting it, you have met God not as something above you, but as something within you. You realize now that the divine is not the opposite of the human, it is its completion. And in that final revelation, you understand what the mystics, the philosophers, and Jung himself were all pointing to, that enlightenment is not light without shadow, but light that includes shadow. It is not perfection, but integration. Not escape, but return. Return to yourself. Return to the world. Return to wholeness. Because the shadow was never there to haunt you, it was there to lead you home. And now that you are home, you can finally rest in the eternal truth whispered by every awakened soul who ever lived. You are not the light or the dark. You are the consciousness that holds them both. That is what it means to be whole. That is what it means to be human. That is what it means to finally see yourself